From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? I'm looking forward to a great conversation and a new guest that we get to meet and learn about.
I'm doing great, Steve. And yourself?
Doing well. It's been we're in the summer of 2025 and looking forward to a strong end to the summer and a good rest of the year. So with us today is somebody who I've gotten to know casually and has been active in the QSys developer community, and I know of him from other places. His name is Patrick Gilligan. He's the principal AV infrastructure engineer at Zillow Group. Welcome, Patrick.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here. We always like to give our guests the platform to talk a little bit about themselves, and just share so our audience can get to know you a little bit better, your AV journey and maybe its relevance to programming.
Okay, cool. I've worked in and around of AV for a long time now. I was into music in high school and college, like many of us, and I wanted to work in the music industry somewhere. At first, I thought it was maybe a studio engineer, and I did a lot of internships and stuff like that. And that's a hard industry to break into, I found. And while I was trying to let that incubate, I was also started getting into hotel AV, going around with the fast fold screen and the projector and the Mackie mixer and the mic. And over time, I just kind of got really into it. And I moved from hotel to more of a specialty events company. And I was kind of the AV multi-op guy. Over time, I got really just into the live sound, and then I started working for a few live sound companies. That seemed like the next step in terms of engineering. Working on stage at a festival was more complicated than the galas and charity events and trade shows that I was doing at the time. I got really into live sound for several years. I was an audio systems engineer, putting up big PA systems, did a little bit of touring and a lot of festivals. And the lifestyle and I found that the better I got at that job, the more I was taking an airplane to work as opposed to a car or the bus, and living in San Francisco where it's already kind of expensive. And it didn't make sense for my personal life really to do that job in perpetuity for me. So I was trying to figure out what else to do. And I had a friend at one of the local live sound companies who had switched over to integrated AV systems. And I went over to his house one day and he gave me a Biamp Tessera to play around with, and he told me what QSys was, and he says, if you do these two trainings, I could probably get you a job. And I wanted to work as a field engineer like he was, but I actually started as a service technician. So I was driving around in the van with all the stuff, and usually just replacing the Crestron endpoint or the 24-volt power supply that had gone bad. And I felt very comfortable with the DSP side of things. I think I retuned a basketball court for a high school that had a lavalier mic in the AV rec on my first day, but the Crestron stuff was just made no sense to me. Control, and wish someone had just shown me the back of like a DMPS and said, this is COM, this is all the different ways, this is CrestNet, all the different ways that you can control a system and kind of what's going on. So I was just in the weeds, and I just decided after work every day, I'm just going to learn this stuff. I started doing all the trainings that I could and a lot of YouTube videos. And eventually I did become a field engineer. And I felt very comfortable again with AEC and DSPs and tuning, but the control I learned over time. And I had always known that I wanted to work on what I thought of as the client side, which meant instead of going from system to system to system, I was going to just like take care of and be very responsible for one company's systems. Because I realized that all these people, these were the people that I'd worked with. A lot of them, they didn't have an AV person, they didn't IT person. And I thought there was a niche to just like really own the AV side of things at a big company who could kind of afford it, I guess. And so I got the job at Zillow, and around during That was in 2020, I believe, during COVID. And or maybe it was 2021, I'm not sure. But anyway, I had also gotten really into learning coding a few years before, but really during COVID, I had a lot of free time. Took all of QSIS's Lua programming courses, but I still felt like there was a knowledge gap. So I started learning JavaScript and then Node.js, and there's just so much more information available for those. And then I was able to kind of transcribe those skills back over to Lua and bring it to AV. But I was also writing a lot of, like, when I started at Zillow, I realized I could make a lot of just little business problems go away with writing a script to do that. You want all this data from our Zoom dashboard here. Why don't I just write a script that pulls it and pushes it to a Google Sheet and updates it every day, so my manager can always know how many Zoom meetings happened the day before and what client version everyone at the company's machine is on. And so it's just a little bit a mix of these hacked together programs. And it was just right before AI, so I really struggled through it. But I'm thankful for that now, because I didn't have like a cursor like I do now, which helps me kind of figure out these programming details, which something gets missed. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I do all of our QSys programming at Zillow, but I also kind of just maintain the tech stack in terms of AV. I'm the main advocate for the network engineer, the configuration on the network switches. I think a lot about how to maintain our code at scale. I work with the DNS and the sysadmin teams, and I work on getting web certificates for the QSys, so that's like a secure access, which you need for a few different applications. So I kind of just think only in terms of programming these days. Now that guy who got me originally into AV, who gave me the BIAMP, he's now we got him hired at Zillow, and his name is Matt Cornick, and he's an incredible field engineer. So kind of offloaded a lot of audio onto him, and I can just think about programming. So it's been a great team. That's kind of the whole story there.
That's really incredible. It's a great story, and it also just shows how if you put your mind to something, you're going to be able to achieve it, and that's kind of what you did. Seems like programming was the add-on to the AV world that you were comfortable with, and that you really were inspired by. How much of what you do, or what interests you now, is it more on the programming side now, or is it more on the AV and design side?
I think programming, similar to when I was working in AV and I saw live sound as this next technical adjacent, but not exactly the same technical leap I could make. Programming and software and technical infrastructure and tools like AWS and the cloud versus the on-prem, and all the ways that packets kind of travel through the world and through our internal networks, and the software that controls them. Those are the worlds that really kind of excite me on a day-to-day basis now, and where I try and think of the AV programming, the interface, the touch panel is just a small portion of that, where I want to get as excellent as I can in that regard. I like to try and think about the whole big picture of programming and software engineering.
I mean, James is a big believer in AV as IT, and I think you're really demonstrating that. I talk a little bit more about some of the solutions, and you don't have to get into the specifics, but some of the solutions that you are addressing, because I liked what you said about you use code to solve a problem or address a need, rather than just writing code.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one thing that's to me very exciting about AV is you actually have this kind of pretty well laid out blueprint in network tooling and infrastructure, and then software tooling and infrastructure. And maybe the networking is a couple years behind that, and the AV is a couple years behind that. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. We see the workflows there. We just need to encourage all of our manufacturers, and whether it's hardware or software or both, to just look to those adjacent industries as kind of guiding lights. And that's what really excites me. So I feel like slow down a little bit. I was coming back from ISE a couple of years ago, and I had met, or I saw on the plane a CEO of a manufacturer that we know, and the whole row was empty actually. So he sat down. I showed him how I was deploying I was writing code that could deploy QSys code from my IDE, from my VS Code environment versus writing it inside of QSys. And he said, "Wow, that's really cool. I don't know a lot of people who are the implications of that are cool. The only thing is you're not nobody knows that you're doing it." So I started these videos of advocacy where I was just doing little tricks like that, and that's kind of how I've met a lot of people, and probably the reason I'm on this podcast now, from these handful of videos that I've put out. And really, what they are all about is I'm not trying to teach anyone how to write QSys code for the most part or do anything. I'm just trying to use little techniques and hacks to work around places where soon I think out of the box solutions will exist for these kind of things. If you can write all of your, let's say, QSys or Crestron code in the IDE, then it lives in your company or your personal GitHub. And then as you evolve as a programmer over time, you see a trail through commits of all the ways you've become a much more elegant programmer over time. And so it's just that little pivot, I think, is just the little things that make places AV could go, to just kind of see like the path that's kind of been laid there before, and that's what makes me excited.
Yeah, I was going to kind of sum that up with you're demonstrating what's possible. And
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's not always the best, or it's not always the most practical for most people's use cases, but it shows you that you can do it. And my goal is that you learn the bigger picture along the way, like a little bit of how this all works. So
absolutely. James, if you want to kind of join in, this kind of hits on a lot of our conversations in the past, everything from, AV is IT, and, being able to think outside of our world, and also, doing stuff to put yourself out there. Um, from our audience's perspective, what are some of the takeaways that you think they should be listening to?
I think the main takeaway I'm getting from Patrick is if you want something bad enough, you put the work in, you're gonna get. Um, it, just like I talking soccer when I'm coaching kids and other people, is hard work outperforms talent when talent doesn't put the hard work in. And not saying Patrick is not talented, but just showing that if you want something bad enough, if you want to learn something, you got to put the work in. You can't just sit there and be like, "Well, I want to be in a QSys programmer," and just sit there. You have to go to training. You have to learn it. You got to put the work in. So that's really the big takeaway I'm taking right there from Patrick is he put the work in. He saw something that he wanted to learn. It was uncomfortable for him. He admitted the programming control wasn't something he was good at, which I found funny because in my thing, I was the opposite. Programming came natural to me, audio didn't. I had to put work in to learn the audio side of things because when I first started out with the audio and went to an audio programming class, there was another student who was the same thing. He was from the programming side, learning audio, and he said a comment that stuck with me. And I said, "Yeah, 100%. I was with that." Before that class, we looked at audios as it's either was there or wasn't there. Other than that, we didn't care. Now I can sit there and go, man, this room sounds horrible. You got to change this and all that stuff. So it's just funny how Patrick came from the audio side to learn programming. I came from the programming side to learn audio. So again, it just shows you put the work in, you'll learn it.
that is so interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to also, touch on, because I think you guys can both relate. Tell us a little bit about the perspective from the client side, because I've never been on that side, and I know that it's just a different view, and it gives you, I think, a little. You use the term owning, the systems, and it it's I'd like you to elaborate a little bit about that because I think that's probably giving you some of the runway to doing things that most people wouldn't actually be doing or having the opportunity to do.
Yeah, great question. I I suggested early into my start at Zillow that I do the QSys programming. We had a few systems. We were in a kind of a post-COVID landscape where at first nobody wanted to come into the office, and they reopened the offices, and the attendance was dismal. And that was around the time of the Delta variant, if you even remember those two terms.
Yeah.
You know, much different time than we live in now. And then something kind of switched. It wore off quick, where people just had this heavy appetite for coming back in and collaborating in person and meeting these people. Zillow said early on, we're going to be a distributed workforce. Our HQ is in the cloud, is what they like to say. But what it does is it breeds people meeting in person. That was a little bit of a tangent to get in the fact that we needed a lot of AV very quickly, with not enough time, money, or personnel than we used to. And it came out, we needed to redo our all hands in San Francisco and in Irvine and in Seattle, kind of all of them as soon as possible. And so that's when I really started to think about if I do the programming. I did think it was kind of peculiar that integrators tend to sell this programming line item as a kind of an a la carte budget. But if you think about code, it's all these three rooms, they're several hundred miles from each other, but they're not really meant to do anything differently. They might have some variations. One had this video system, while the other had this video system for AV over IP. But at the end of the day, people want to be able to use Zoom. We use Zoom, or use a conferencing platform as easy as possible without too much interaction or use case, and without an expert operator in the room, versus, like my old career where you can trust experts to manage the tech. So that really made me think about how can I use the same code but with kind of a config file that just tells the code to behave differently. So if the config file says there's 2 projectors and an confidence monitor, then the code is just looking for what the config file is telling them. And I just kind of took that out of software engineering. You can find a lot of people's Medium articles about separating code and config, and it's evolved now into technical infrastructure with products like Terraform, entire infrastructure as code. How this configuration can sit in a different layer. And so that was the first thing that I really kind of nerded out on, but it came out of a business need where we needed a lot to happen at the same time. And if I spent all afternoon finding like an elegant way for let's say a pop-up window to come up, and it times out over X seconds, but all has an X button, but if you do something else, it automatically closes the pop-up window. If I spend an afternoon on that logic, I don't really ever want to write it again, and I don't want to like copy it over. So it comes from another very basic software principle, is DRY, don't repeat yourself. So if you find yourself, you write a function that prints 4 and then a function that prints 5, what you should do is write a function that prints X, and then X is the argument, and then you add 4 here and 5 there where you need it. That's like the most basic distillation of the principle of don't repeat yourself. So that's kind of like all the themes I'm getting at, is the business need created the solutions at the end. So it was kind of a fun time to be working there in that post-COVID recovery landscape.
That's really great. That's something I have not heard before, and I wrote that down. I'm gonna use that. So it's really a good term, and I personally subscribe to the fact too of let's not have individual code bases. Let's look at what can we do across the enterprise that can satisfy the 80 or 90% of your systems. You're always going to have those bespoke ones, but it sounds like you've really gotten the opportunity to dig in and optimize, which I don't think a lot of people tend to do in our industry. We're just looking at what does it take to get to the finish line.
Yeah. Yesterday I was in Seattle, and I had a flight, and I had to leave for the airport at 3, and I decided at 9 a.m. I was gonna update the programming on one of our old all hands, which normally would be a stupid idea. But what I wanted to do is, it was like the last system that had a slightly different code base inside the file. And so I just had to change little things. And, there were extra specific use cases. And it would have been a lot faster if I had just written them directly into that code. But what I was trying to do is, I had the config and the code open separately, so I could capture every single use case I had created when I commissioned the system the first time it within that file. And the benefit is that what I was trying to do is that system's code is identical to every other all hands' code. And that was the one kind of outlier. So it takes a little bit of extra time up front, but it's worth it in the end. And back when I did live sound, I had a lot of tricks like that where I would set up if I was doing monitors at a festival, I'd set up all these little extra things that took extra time up front, an extra couple hours. But during the festival, when everything's what we call throw and go, everything's happening very quickly, and it's a mix of engineering and get her done at the same time. I had learned that if there was a little bit of kind of pre-production I did just with myself, that I'd be thankful. So I think that principle is carried over.
That's really great. Well, this is probably a good place for us to wrap up this episode, but audience, please stay tuned to next week's episode, because you will get to hear more from Patrick. We'll be having him back. Um, until we hear from you again, how can people get in touch with you, Patrick, and get to either know you better, or learn more about what you do in the industry and so forth?
Yeah, sure. I have a YouTube channel that I'm always trying to add more videos to. It's called Patrick Gill _dev, or youtube.com/that. And then you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty permissive about adding people, and when people reach out, and I like to talk to people who are interested in the same stuff as me. Hasn't gotten too crazy yet. That's just Patrick Gilligan. LinkedIn, Patrick Gilligan. If you typed in Patrick Gilligan Zillow, you'd find it right away. You'd probably find it right away just through, if you're in this industry, you'd find it, just from my name. So
And
those are probably the best places.
Another great place is the QSys developer community, which we've talked about in past episodes as well. So
I
that's
should have mentioned that. Yeah,
how you and I
definitely.
connected, I think, originally.
Yes, absolutely.
James, any takeaways or anything you wanted to share, and how can people get in touch with you and continue this conversation?
Oh, great episode with Patrick here, and thank you again for joining us and providing us this information. My two takeaways, as I mentioned earlier, put the work in. You'll learn stuff, but also Patrick hit on something, is putting the work in early. Yeah, you can save time down the road, but as I said, especially with coaching and all that stuff, is put the work in early or put the work in late. Either way, you got to put the work in. It's when you're going to put it in. Usually when you put the work in later, the work is double or more pressured. So putting in early is actually better for you. So yeah, no, great information there, Patrick. Thank you again. If anyone wants to get a hold of me, Google me. You'll find me on LinkedIn as AV_James King. X in the LinkedIn community of Ask the Programmer. Again, Google me. You'll find me.
And Patrick, we'll have to get you in the AV Ask the Programmer LinkedIn community as well, just a group on LinkedIn. And we try to give people the opportunity to elaborate on the episodes that they've been a part of, or follow up on the conversation.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
One of the things that I got from this that we can talk about some more is that you got to put yourself out there. We've talked about that quite a bit on this podcast, but if we wouldn't be here today having this conversation if Patrick didn't make it a point to, you know, be part of the community and want to have these conversations and share what he's doing, and also give information. So that's really important, and I think that's something that programmers may not necessarily struggle with, but may be more apprehensive to do. And this is living proof that it pays off. So for me, you could reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media platforms. My company, Control Concepts, is a supporter of this podcast, and we do develop the building blocks that programmers can use to get their projects done, whether you're integrating equipment or you're looking to add functionality. You could find some of those resources at controlconcepts.net. And as James mentioned, we are very eager to keep these conversations going, continue to build the community of programmers, and also offer support and give people a chance to connect with one another. On our LinkedIn group, Ask the Programmer is a great place to find some of that community, but you can also reach out to us directly as well, and we definitely want to connect with you. If you are listening to this podcast on your podcast player, you could also catch us on YouTube in the video version. And if you are watching on YouTube, you can listen conveniently on your favorite podcast player. Many ways to interact with us and leave a rating, review, comment, and so forth. And we certainly want to hear from you. So thank you for listening and watching. Until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.